All right, thank you very much for joining us today. Sorry for such short notice. And it's been 30 years since the events of Operation Lalang. Today I have here joining me the 4 female detainees who were given extended detention sentences. Would you call it a sentence? It's not.
Sentence.
Still considered a sentence, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Were given extended detention sentences after the first 60 days of detention as outlined by the ISA during Operation Lalang in 1987. So let's just go one by one. Can you introduce yourselves?
Okay, I am. My name is Lim Chin Chin. What else do you want to know?
And what were you doing at that time in 1987?
In 1987, oh God, I can't even remember.
You were in the church.
Oh yes, I was working for the Council of Churches of Malaysia, in their research unit.
And you are Irene?
And I'm Irene Xavier. I was with Persatuan Sahabat Wanita at that time, organizing women workers in the plantations and factories, electronics factories.
Okay.
I was a lecturer at the University Pertanian Malaysia, which is now University Putra Malaysia. I was teaching there, yes.
Okay, and Heng Leng, what about you?
Yeah, I was also University Putra Malaysia, but at that time it was University Pertanian Malaysia, and I was a lecturer there, but I was on study leave. I was doing my PhD, and also I think we were also all involved in NGO activities at that time.
What is your clearest memory of the incident on that night of Operation Lalang? Ms. Heng Leng, would you like to start? What's your clearest memory of Operation Lalang that night?
Okay, yeah. My clearest memory of the incident was being this police officer or whoever he was, appeared at my gate and asked me to open the gate and open the door because they're from the police. And it was like quite late at night. I don't really know what time it was. But I think I was just about getting ready to go to bed, and I was so trusting of them that I opened the gate and opened the door and just let them in just like that. And I remember this long night which they spent going through all my books, picking out over 100 books, and writing down every single title on a piece of paper. And all the while, I think it took them about 3 hours, and all the while I was not allowed to make any phone calls, not allowed to do anything, just had to sit there and wait. That was a very, very long night. Yeah.
So Chin Chin, what about you? What is your clearest memory of that night?
The clearest memory I had was that I knew Heng Leng was already arrested, and I wasn't sure whether I would be or not. And what happened was that I heard the knock on the door, and they said, "Police, buka pintu." And I knew, and then when I heard that, I knew already. But
And what about you, Miss Irene?
I was actually, they say it is not detained, but in my thinking of it is, I was actually detained in Singapore. I was getting into the lift to my brother's place, and I was together with Sybil John Josie, who was also detained. So 2 of us went into the lift, and suddenly a big number of men came into the lift. And on the floor where my brother lived, they caught us actually, physically didn't allow us to move. And then they said, we are going to send you over to Malaysia because the Malaysian government is waiting to detain you.
So what about you, Cecelia? How did it go down for you? What happened when you were arrested?
Yeah. I was in Jakarta at that time. I was evaluating a women's organization, and I received a call, I think the next morning, from a good friend to say that KK Tan, who is my housemate, had been arrested. So that was, well, it was a shock and not a shock because we had already kind of anticipated a crackdown. Yeah. And I remember asking her, what about this person, this person, this person, and this person? And the next day, they were all taken in, okay? Heng Leng, Chin, Irene, and all were taken in. Well, then friends in Malaysia asked me not to come back because they said the Mahathir is looking for you. So I went to Hong Kong. I was there for about a week and a half. But I wanted to come back. You see, there's no point in me, take overseas. What can I do overseas? So I came back, I think on the 13th of November. Nothing happened at the airport. So the next day, I went to work, started the petition to free Heng Leng and Keng and, the rest. At night on Saturday, I still remember, I think it was Saturday, 14th of November, I was at the WDC office because they were the secretariat for the anti-ISA detainees. And that night, the police came to the WDC office, Women's Development Collective office, and asked for me. The woman police officer came and said, "Oh, welcome back from Hong Kong." So then they took me to the house. I was accompanied by 3 brave bodyguards, and they searched the house for about 2 hours. Yeah. So that was the memory of the detention, the period.
Now, some of you said that you expected this to happen. In that sense, now, what did you think was the reason for your arrest? Did something come through your mind at that moment when you were being detained? Why was I being detained? What would you say would have been the reason for your arrest? Can we start with you, Heng Leng?
Well, a few months before that, I think about 6 months before that, Singapore, there was a ISA arrest of many Singaporeans, the so-called Marxist conspiracy. Many of them we know. So in Malaysia, we set up our own committee to support the Singapore detainees. And there seemed to be like a pattern, when something happened in Singapore before ISA arrest, then they would come for the Malaysians. I mean, we didn't expect it and didn't expect because, we were already involved in NGO activities against the Bakun Dam, pro the people in Papa, anti-nuclear waste. We had demonstration, against rape, the citizens against rape. So I suppose, and then I think there were rumors that there would be a crackdown. We heard rumors from, internal sources. So we had among ourselves already discussion about what to do if any of us would be taken in. Yeah.
I think at that time there was a political crisis that went beyond the NGO world as well. So UMNO was facing its own crisis. Mahathir was facing crisis within UMNO. So he probably had to do something to distract from the challenges that he was facing within UMNO. And there were other activisms that I guess you could call it, in other sectors of the society, of Malaysian society at that time.
Now, let's move on to the parts of ISA, starting with its 60 days of detention without trial. And given that these 60 days of detention without trial is held in solitary confinement, correct?
Yes.
And there are a lot of things about solitary confinement that sometimes people may not know about. Some people say it's just you in a room, what's the big deal?
I think maybe it's good to let Irene and Chin speak on this.
Okay, yeah, how about that? Chin, how about
you? Are you honest?
What was solitary confinement like?
Well, I was in a cell. It has a little toilet in there, a little tap for bathing, with a half a wall. Okay, and this little bit of wash area faces the door directly, you know, and it has bunk beds, cement block with very thin overlay of plywood. That's what we had. And we do not get out of the cell unless our interrogating officers call for us. And then we are given dark glasses that act as blindfold, and we are accompanied by a guard to the interrogating room. So that was the only excursion out of the cell. And the other excursion I remember out of the cell is to see the doctor, you know, who was did a very cursory kind of examination. Most of the time we have to be very, very creative inside our cell, you know. So to keep track of the days, we had above the cell there's this ventilation, you know, hose, and to keep track of the days, I used the base of the toothpaste to scratch on the wall, you know, so that I know how many days I've been in there. Because that time I didn't know how many days I was going to be in there. Theoretically I knew it was 60 days, but then, you know, I wasn't sure. Irene?
Yeah, I mean, Chin, myself and Heng Leng, we were all in the same block or cell or whatever you call it.
How did you know that if you were kept in the same space?
Yeah, because one of the days in the door there's a kind of a metal window that opens from the outside, so only the guards can open it. So one day it was open, so I went and looked out and I saw Heng Leng sweeping away the water from her cell to the outside. So I was shocked to see her in a way, and happy as well. Then I know, okay, Heng Leng is here. And then they call out our numbers. We are not called by name, but we are called by numbers. Then I began to sort of try and recognize the voices of the people.
How about you two, Cecelia and Heng Leng? How would you describe, and of course probably your most vivid memory of solitary confinement and the cell that you were held in?
They interrogated me a lot. So I remembered that at least for the first 72 hours, I don't think I was even allowed to sleep. And even for the first, I think at least 3 weeks, if not 4 weeks, I was taken out of the cell a lot. So I wasn't really in, quote unquote, in the cell as solitary confinement. And I remember that the police officer used to threaten me in a way and said that actually you have it good. I mean, they were telling me how good I have it, because they were saying that this is not really solitary confinement. They were telling me that for quote-unquote communist people, they used to put real solitary confinement, which means that you don't see night or day, there's no window, you don't even hear anybody, don't see anybody at all. So I guess they were trying to make me feel grateful for the little cell that I had. So I remember that, you know, and I also remember that after the period of very intense interrogation, I mean during the period of intense interrogation, I didn't have any time at all to even think about where I am. But after that period, I remember that I requested for books, and I think they gave me a book.
Yeah, I guess our experiences are more or less similar. When I came in later, I think in a sense it was fortunate, because I felt that many of the questions had already been answered by others.
Oh, okay.
But there was still the interrogation. I don't remember how many hours, but I remember that I was on this stool and they kept interrogating. I think I nearly fell off the stool. That's
Okay.
when the IO said that you better go and sleep or something like that. Well, you don't know day and night. I only know by the food they give you. Maybe morning there'll be I can't remember, some teh tarik or lunch, some rice or dinner. Yeah, I can't really remember. I think maybe you just want to forget that period in your life because it was more psychological. The pressure was more psychological because you have no access to the world, you don't know what's happening. I think I got to see my family after 2 weeks. Yeah. At that time, I think they brought me to the headquarters, the IPK, is it called? And I was so happy to see the blue sky. You know, I was just looking up, you know, at the sky and breathing the air. Yeah, but there was only very short visits. So you just have to. But I remember I read the Bible a bit. I can't remember what happened actually. Yeah.
Since we're talking about the solitary confinement, another thing that has been brought up a lot is that some people allege that the treatment that some of you got, especially during interrogation, was akin to perhaps torture. Do you have any recollection of what you would consider to be torture or something to that extent?
I remember they use a lot of psychological type of tricks. So, for example, there was one time they did a role play or whatever. They tried to make me believe that they were going to inject me with something or other, some drug or other, just to make me say, you know, to I don't know. I think the general thing is to let you to make you let down your guard, so that when they finally decide that you have already let down your guard, then they ask you to write your whole life history from the time that you can remember you were born and until, you know, the time that you are in the cell.
Yeah, for me, I will say it was torture. In addition to what Heng Leng said about using psychology and using the strategy of the good cop, bad cop kind of thing, they actually hit me. For all the interrogation sessions that I have had, there was always a woman present. She didn't say anything, but she was there, a woman officer. But the day that they hit me, there was no woman present. Just that two men, and they were just in a big rage. I don't know why. They just said, you all are liars, and all you Catholics, they said, all you Catholics are liars, you all are sinners, you are this and that. And he just like worked himself into a rage. And then he showed me two sticks, one metal and one wood, 2x4 kind of wood. Then he said, choose which stick you want to be hit with. And you know, that kind of thing. And he actually finally took, I didn't make any choice. He picked up the wooden stick and he actually hit me.
And Cecelia, what about you? Do you have any other experiences?
Well, if it was the interrogation, you know, the psychological pressure, I wasn't physically abused as such, but they were trying to make you confess to things that was quite ridiculous. That, you know, that there was, like, for example, I went to Laos maybe a couple of years ago, and then they tried to make me say that I was involved with the Laotian Communist Party or something like that, you know, and I went on a holiday. They tried to link me to the Comintern of Eastern Europe, you know, some communist network. They tried to make me say that I was involved with the United Front of the Malayan Communist Party. And and I mean, I absolutely know nobody there. We went hiking in Gunung Nuang, Chin, Heng Leng, myself, and Dave, and KK Tan. And they tried to make me say that it was guerrilla training. You know, we all went for guerrilla training. I said, you're crazy, you know. I'm not, of course, maybe I scolded them, I can't remember. It's ridiculous. Huh? And then they tried to persuade you to be their listening pole. You know, so I was saying, oh, what is the listening pole? Listening poll is that they will release you, and then you got to spy for them. And also they're trying to make me come out on TV and confess on TV.
And Chee Heng, were you abused in any way or tortured?
Well, the whole arrest and detention itself was, kind of and the stress associated with it was in a sense a torture, because what happened is that I was in there worrying about my family out there, worried that they don't know what is happening to me, where I was, and my family outside was doing the same, was worried. So it was, for me, it was very stressful, worrying about people that I cared and loved. And I was worried about my friends, of course, who were in there. I knew that Heng Leng had already been arrested. I knew Irene, but the strange thing was that I heard, you were in the cell opposite to me, and the guard asked you your name, and you said Irene, and I thought it was Irene Fernandez, So, but you didn't sound like Irene Fernandez, so I was really puzzled who that Irene was, and until during my family visit, I was able to confirm. But there were a lot of threats, there were a lot of feeding false information to me, saying that, so and so said this about you. And while I found it difficult to believe, but I understand that under the circumstances, these things can happen, and they said these things about you. So what do you have to say? It was the interrogations were really, really very pressurizing.
Now, moving on with the program, after the 60 days of initial detention under the Internal Security Act, the detainees, those that are given sentences, are moved to a place called the Kamunting Detention Center, where they are made to serve a renewable 2-year jail term. And during this time, they're given much more freedom to move around, much more freedom to do what they want to do, not exactly complete freedom, of course. And it was a time in, when people started to be able to visit them, the families started to be able to visit them much more often. Do you have any recollection of how it was in Kamunting? Just a very quick one.
Kamunting experience was much better in relation to the 60 days in that sense. And then I think the best part of it is that you can speak to other people, which you couldn't do at that you couldn't do at the 60 days. But even in Kamunting, our IOs came back to see us.
Oh, okay.
They came back to see us. Then we also appeared before the advisory board, where they sort of went through the charges, the so-called charges that were not made in court, but just police said that you were in Philippines, you gave this speech, you did this and that, whatever. So those were the things that happened in Kamunting.